We are never getting to the Dark Continent. This bombshell theory is brought to you by Squarespace, but more about them later. And it's not because of all the hiatuses. It's because that was never the plan to begin with. At least not for one King Nasibi Huigoro, the current ruler of the Kakin Empire and primary benefactor of this voyage. His ulterior motive was to use this voyage as an opportunity to host the traditional Kakin succession contest. But the big problem with using the Black Whale 1 as the venue for the succession contest is that it seems to conflict quite heavily with King Nasibi's publicly stated goal of going to the Dark Continent, as well as constructing a settlement and using its undiscovered wonders to build power and riches unlike anything the human realm in the middle of Lake Mobius is capable of. But it's hard enough to get to the Dark Continent even under the best of circumstances, with everything threatening to destroy the ship from the outside, let alone when you've got a succession contest sparking internal chaos threatening to destroy the ship from inside. It really does seem quite counterproductive to the goals of the Kakin Empire, unless getting to the Dark Continent was never the plan in the first place. Something that we always need to keep in mind with this arc is that getting to the Dark Continent is beyond Netero's goal. He engineered this entire situation just so that he could step foot on that land again, and the conventional logic says that Beyond seduced King Nasibi with all sorts of promises of wealth and weaponry that would ensure the prosperity of the Kakin Empire. But I think that Beyond may have seduced Nasibi with an idea that is far more simplistic, which is to provide him with the perfect venue and the perfect materials for the succession contest. Politically, it's very difficult to convincingly explain the deaths of 13 members of the royal family. However, it becomes much easier to sell a large tragedy if you had, say, the entire royal family engaging in a highly risky voyage to the most dangerous location on the planet. In that case, if 99% of the royal family were to die, then no one would even question it. It's just, it's another tragic tragedy. More victims of the Dark Continent. I honestly don't think that King Nasibi has any intention of ever arriving at the Dark Continent. I believe that he and Beyond Netero are working together to plot the destruction of the Black Whale 1 and the systematic slaughter of the 200,000 people sailing aboard it, which would give both King Nasibi and Beyond Netero exactly what they want. Let me explain. After I take a moment to explain today's sponsor, Squarespace. Through Squarespace, you can sell anything through an exceptionally easy to set up online store, be it physical, digital, or service products. In my case, I sell physical shirts, and mate, you would be surprised just how much of a pain doing something as simple as that can be. Which is why I genuinely use and love Squarespace, because they make it mercifully simple yet somehow still really good. Squarespace offers an incredible amount of ready-to-go website templates that are customizable to your heart's content through the Fluid Engine, a next-generation website design system to further unlock and cultivate your creativity. So you can and should check out Squarespace through my link in the description, which will save you 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. And thank you so much again to Squarespace, because it's sponsors like this that make producing our fictional hunter content possible on a regular basis, so please do check them out. But for now, it's back to you, me. Firstly, in regards to King Nasibi, the foundation of the Kakin Empire is built on sacrifice, even going all the way back to the first king of Kakin who conjured the Sea Dern. Kakin was originally a very tiny, powerless country that was about to be absorbed by all of the powerful warring states around it. It had no chance until it did. And it's difficult to tell when this took place in history because we're looking back potentially thousands of years. It is said to be ancient history. And during these ancient times, the first king of Kakin had a rather cunning plan. In order to ensure that his kingdom survived, he conjured the Sea Dern and decided to have his children battle to the death to decide who would inherit the throne. And look, if you know anything about Nen, you'll quickly understand how the concept of sacrifice compounds its power. One classic example is Gon. He was willing to sacrifice his potential and his life to unlock truly terrifying power for a brief moment. Now imagine what kind of power would result if we didn't just sacrifice one child, but many, many childs, and even some adults. That is the secret to the longevity and prosperity of the Kakin Empire. The fact that each new king inherits the sacrifice of all of their siblings who died to put them on the throne, as well as the siblings of the previous generation, and the one before that, and the one before that, and so on and so forth. Each new generation always building and compounding on the last. The scale of Nen use that's happening here is unparalleled. And it's considered to be quietly honored to be used in this way, or at least that's how Nasibi made it sound when he looked upon the corpse of his dead daughter Momose and stated that she was shining even brighter in death. He even says it almost as if he's envious of her position. But he's not wrong, because death is not the end for the Kakin royal family. However, whether you'd want to personally experience their form of eternal life, that's a different question. When the concept of guardian spirit beasts were introduced, it was said that they possess a dead relative of the prince that the beast is assigned to. That dead relative is then warped warped into an unrecognizable form based on the desires and true nature of the prince that it's conjured to protect. And that's why the princes can't directly control or in most cases even see the spirit beasts, because they're conjured from the legacy of the royal family, not via the princes themselves. And each subsequent king becomes more and more driven to see the empire grow. But that's a problem because there's only so many children that each king can physically have to offer as a sacrifice. Believe me, King Nasibi has tried his best because he seems to spend every second of every day inside of a woman, having produced 14 legal children and at least 3 illegitimate children. Let's go crazy. Let's say that King Nasibi somehow produced 100 children to sacrifice. Even that is such a painfully small and irrelevant number compared to what King Nasibi is planning to do here, which is to sacrifice all 200,000 people aboard the Black Whale 1 for the sake of the Kakin Empire. Nasibi even refers to them as exactly that in chapter 362. He addresses the people aboard the ship as if they're mere resources. 200,000 people to allow his eventual successor to, quote, carve out your own future. These people are materials. They are the clay with which to sculpt. And for what it's worth, King Nasibi does intend to be one of them. At one stage, he even says that he can't die until his ceremonial duties are finished, implying that he absolutely intends on dying. So one of those 14 casket capsules is likely for him, since he only has 14 legal children and one of them is going to survive the contest. But if you look at the fancy burial chamber built within the Black Whale 1, you'll notice that the entire room is fitted out with Nen Inscription, a technique that boosts aura output or potency when applied to objects. Nen Inscription has been around for a long time in Hunter x Hunter. Like when Gon first got the box from Jing, that was coated all over with Nen Inscription, as was the functionality of Greed Island. And one theory is that it's like constructing aura circuits that can very precisely funnel power with minimal loss. But what's happening here is on a scale even greater than that of what we saw on Greed Island, and it's not isolated to just the caskets. In fact, it would appear that there are circuits leading from elsewhere to the caskets, and it's entirely possible that this whole ship has been constructed to allow aura to be funneled directly into this room. As in, no matter where someone dies, there's a nearby inscription circuit that can carry it down to the burial chamber. And this is where King Nasibi's illegitimate children come into play. They don't just exist because Nasibi screws anything that moves. They have a purpose, which is why they're granted positions in the underworld. And the key figure we're looking at here is Morena Prudhoe. She's currently the leader of the Heoli family and has declared war on her rival mafia factions led by other illegitimate Nasibi spawn, which is threatening to send the lower levels of the Black Whale 1 into a state of anarchy that no faction has the power to contain. Morena herself has no interest in the succession contest. In fact, she has no interest in, well, anything. She genuinely just wants to watch the world burn, which is very convenient because that's exactly what Nasibi wants to happen on the lower levels. So it's almost as if Morena was strategically positioned to carry this out, whether she knows it or not. And this is going to lead to a situation predicted by Mizaistom. He correctly deduced that the mafia warfare, with the increasing number of crimes and the increasing brutality of crimes, would swiftly result in fear-induced riots by the general population and inspiring full-on purge-style behavior, where it's everyone for themselves. You kill or you be the one who is killed. It's like a much larger succession contest, a much grander scale, but with no prize for winning. However, the aura of each of these individuals who participate and die and or are sacrificed in this contest will then be contributed to the pot of Kakin aura. And Mizaistom jumps straight to the endgame scenario of the Black Whale 1 sinking once the contest reaches a critical point, which again is exactly what King Nasibi wants, because it's the perfect way to sacrifice hundreds and thousands of people without anyone even asking a single question. Eventually, the winner of the succession contest will return to the human realm and they will be pitied. The winner will be considered the victim of a tragic journey that was doomed from the beginning. The tragedy, that dark continent, as opposed to the beneficiary of a plot to sacrifice 200,000 people to a world domination scheme. Now, this works out very nicely for the Kakin Empire, very nicely indeed, but there's a whole second side to this coin with Beyond Netero. On paper, this isn't conducive to his goal of the sinking of the ship and the destruction. I mean, if the ship sinks, how do they get to the Dark Continent? If they don't get to the Dark Continent, then he's part of there. He doesn't get there. Well, it's not that simple. Because when discussing the Dark Continent and the succession contest, we often forget a little character named Bill. He's the other surviving bodyguard currently working with Kurapika to protect Prince Wobble. But what most people forget is that he's also a member of Beyond Netero's Dark Continent expedition team, and as a result, Bill was made aware of 3 mechanisms of escape from the Black Whale 1. The first involved a conjurer named Kurton. He's the dude guy in this image with spiky hair on the right. He was also part of Beyond's expedition team and apparently had a really cool net ability that allowed him to transform into a boat. I guess kind of like Subona's Rider's High, which gave her the power to morph into a wide variety of vehicles, so long as those vehicles were fueled by the aura of a pilot or a driver or, well, I don't know, the role changes depending on what kind of vehicle she becomes. And Kurton is almost exactly the same, because Bill said that he also required the aura of others. But none of that matters anymore because Kurton, he died quite quickly. He got a bit of a stabby right after the Black Whale 1 departed. So that leaves us with 2 escape options, both much more difficult. Bill says that another method involves Pariston's help, which is very interesting because we have yet to see Pariston aboard the ship. But Bill also adds that Pariston's help would be difficult, whereas the third method requires Beyond Netero himself and will be even more difficult than Pariston. That's quite something. But I do agree with that, especially since Beyond Netero is currently in the custody of the Zodiacs. But the point is that Beyond plans not just 1, but at least 3 mechanisms to escape the Black Whale 1, one of which he's capable of enacting on his own. So Beyond's plan was never to use a vessel manned by the V5 or the Hunter Association to get to the Dark Continent. No, what he's doing right now is using them to ferry him to a distance close enough that he and his assorted team can escape via their own methods and make it to the continent themselves. Another thing to remember is that the Black Whale 1 was never meant to go all the way to the Dark Continent itself. The Black Whale 1 was going to stop on the New Continent, after which point the Hunter Association, they were planning to fool the Karkin Empire with a clever ruse. They were going to tell them that the New Continent was the Dark Continent and then sneak off in another ship captained by Moral. So Beyond Netero would have been transferred to that ship, where it would have been nearly impossible to escape because it doesn't have anywhere near the potential for chaos that the vessel containing 200,000 people does. On that kind of ship, you could feasibly conjure some sort of distraction, a big one as well. Ideally one that would get rid of all of the Zodiacs and all of the Hunter Association in some sort of big catastrophic event. And that's the plan, which the V5 nations and the Hunter Association have perfectly fallen for. They have followed the path Beyond's laid out for them this entire time, and they're now in a very dire trap. Beyond Netero is collaborating with King Nasibi to not only host the succession contest, but to ferry Beyond's team to the Dark Continent and kill anyone and everyone sent to prevent them from carrying out whatever mission they have on that landmass. So each of them gets what they want. The Karkin Empire has a new ruler with 200,000 sacrifices prepped for world domination, which Beyond Netero doesn't care about in the slightest, because he's only concerned with what happens on the Dark Continent. Screw whatever happens in the human world. And that's potentially the scariest part. The fact that I don't think Beyond plans on returning, because he would have no method of getting back. In fact, it's a huge part of the plan to ditch the ride there. So he's giving Nasibi and the Karkin Empire full control over the human realm because he sees an even bigger, much more terrifying prize waiting for him on the Dark Continent.